Well, welcome to another Black History Conversations. We've passed 100 now, 100 sessions. There's just been so many wonderful opportunities, and all these are recorded on Belong Nottingham's YouTube site, and they're also, most of them, on the Black History Conversations website. But we have work to do on that website, and then it will make them all much more accessible. Anyway, I'm Liz Millman from Learning Links International. I'm actually in Australia at the moment, but I'm flying back to Britain on Sunday. So after 3 and nearly a half long years here, it'll be great to get back to the UK. So we're going to be welcoming Dr. Richard Benjamin from the University of Liverpool in a moment. But before that, we're just going to move on because I'm here in Australia. So the way we start all our meetings here in Australia is with an acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Wurundjeri people who live in my area, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, and the culture of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across the nation. Right, we'll move on to the next thing, and that is to say that about acknowledgements and apologies, and I value comments after this as well, because in Australia it's expected that at all meetings, gatherings and events we share an acknowledgement of country. So it's an opportunity to show respect to the traditional owners, recognising the continuing connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to country. And in Australia at the moment, there's a lot of discussion going on because the new government is set up a referendum so that formally in the Constitution of Australia, the First Nation people can be acknowledged. And what they wanted to do after considerable consultations was that they wanted to give a voice to Parliament. So that's one of the things that's really going on, and I'm sure we'll, even in the UK, even in Jamaica, I'm sure you'll hear about it. But one of the things we've been exploring at the start of Black History Conversations, is there a way to acknowledge the injustice of European actions in invading, taking possession of, and exploiting so many people and peoples and countries in the world? Okay, can you just all switch your mics off, please? And this is the version that I'm presenting today. I acknowledge the injustice of European actions in invading and taking possession and exploiting so many countries in the world, and enslaving and brutally treating so many Africans. As a person of European heritage, my ancestors may well have been engaged in some way in the trade, in transatlantic slavery, as one side of my family lived in Scale Hall, Lancaster, which is a coastal community near Liverpool. Others of my family own salt mines in Cheshire. My family are going to undertake some heritage research this summer in the UK. So we can maybe at the end of the session have some more conversation about that, or maybe in the discussions that are coming up. But we also need to recognise that it's the International Decade for People of African Descent. And we keep promising that we're going to focus on this in 1 or 2 sessions. There's so many things been going on. And now we're going to welcome Dr. Richard Benjamin and also Joan Grant. Joan, I'm delighted you've joined us. Richard, this is wonderful.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me, Liz. Thank you very much for your patience in getting me here. And it's lovely to meet such a friendly group of individuals on a Friday afternoon.
Well, it's a lovely opportunity. I'm so pleased. So Garrick's going to join in with me with the discussion, and anybody else can who wants to as well. So first of all, just you do your introduction about yourself and who you are, so we all know. You have to unmute yourself.
it's a lot harder on the phone, isn't it, doing this? And my eyesight's not struggling to see myself.
Leave yourself unmuted now, all right.
Yeah, that okay, good.
Yeah, that's
so yeah, Richard, currently on secondment at the University of Liverpool as a visiting professor of slavery and public engagement. Many of you I've not met before, but some of you guys are familiar. I know Garrick and Michael well, who are on the call, and I've worked with them over the years in different guises. But from 2007 until 2021, I was the head of the International Slavery Museum here in Liverpool, not too far from Lancaster, and Lizzie's family home. And I do know the hall that you were mentioning then, Liz.
Oh.
Yeah, I've done some work with people in Lancaster, but maybe that's another discussion later. There's a lot of good work going on up there, particularly by Lancaster Black History Month group. And so I was at the International Slave Museum, which is part of National Museums Liverpool. For those of you that don't know, that's the largest group of national museums. There's up to 7 of them in and around the city of Liverpool. Walker Art Gallery, World Museum, Museum of Liverpool, the Slavery Museum, Maritime Museum, Lady Lever Art Gallery. There's a lot of them outside of London. So it's a really large cultural landscape in the city, and not many people realise that within our sector, it's still, I'm sure you're not surprised to hear, still very much London-centric. So people forget that there's a lot of national museums in the north of the country. I am not originally from Liverpool, as those of you can tell, particularly those of you with your own northern accent. So I'm a Yorkshireman by birth, but I've been in Liverpool for half my life, which I'm sad to say is over 25 years, so you can tell how old I am there. So Liverpool is my home, and I studied, and it is relevant, is this, in the early 90s, I studied community and race relations at a place called Edge Hill College, now Edge Hill University. And that was one of the few colleges of higher education anywhere in the country that looked at issues around race relations legislation. We did modules on African history. It was a real eye-opener for someone like me who's from a diverse background, but equally I'm from a very small Yorkshire town. And I was only being interviewed yesterday by someone who was asking me how I came to Liverpool in the first place. And when I first came to Liverpool in the 90s, it was a big deal for someone who wasn't from a community to come to a city that had communities, and it had black communities of various types, from the Caribbean or whether it be Africa. My dad's Guyanese, but I wasn't part of a community. Like I said, I'm from a small Yorkshire town. But my family history, like many people who themselves are from diverse backgrounds, directly relates in some shape or form to many of the issues that you guys have talked about on many occasions and that you're talking about today. My dad's from, Demerara, and family still in Guyana. So obviously it was central to, the British transatlantic slave trade and European transatlantic slave trade. So being head of ISM has always been incredibly personal to me. And that's an important point I try to get across to people. We're not the all-seeing oracle. Sometimes people assume museums are. They're not. They're living and breathing organisms. They're incredibly subjective. And there isn't a neutral museum. That doesn't exist. Although it's a debate in the museum world, which is still raging, to be honest with you. It's not as if everyone's got past that there are these bastions of neutrality. But for those people that worked on the Slavery Museum, part of National Museums Liverpool, it was often very personal to them, particularly as most of us came from diverse backgrounds. So everything we did was imbued with that kind of personal element to it. And I think that's a really important point to get across. We're people and individuals with our own histories as well. That said, we work in a very large organisation, which has its own issues. So the narrative that you tell in a museum like the International Slave Museum, there was a long journey to get to it, particularly in Liverpool, and people like Michael and Garrick know that full well because they were part of these discussions within Liverpool to even get to a museum like the International Slave Museum. Its predecessor was the Transatlantic Slavery Gallery, which was in the basement of what is the Merseyside Maritime Museum, and that was open from 1994 until 2006. And then the International Slave Museum opened, and it moved to the third floor. So there was some significance there in the locations of where these heritage facilities were, the basement, and then to the third floor. And just to finish before we kind of get into other discussions, there's an ongoing capital project now. So the Liverpool waterfront, which is the main tourist part of the city of Liverpool, probably, that's where the Maritime Museum, the Slavery Museum, the Museum of Liverpool are located. It's where Tate Liverpool is located as well. And there's a major waterfront transformation project, which includes all the heritage facilities, Liverpool City Council, Liverpool City Region, the government. There's a lot of people involved, a lot of money involved. And the Slavery Museum will shortly close in its current guise because it will have to go on the road for a couple of years, because when it reopens, it will also have moved into what's called the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. building. So if you ever go to Liverpool, Royal Albert Dock, like the iconic building that you see when you enter it from the centre of Liverpool is this very imposing building with big red portico entrance. And it was the administrative centre of the Royal Albert Dock. It was called the Dock Traffic Office, so a fairly boring name originally. And it fell into a terrible state, as much of the dock did, and very close to being knocked down in the 80s and 90s. And again, Garrick, Michael, you guys, be able to say more about that than me. But it wasn't, and the area was kind of redeveloped. National Museums Liverpool has actually had and owned that building since 2008, 2009, but it's never had the funding to make it our front door. And it's always been the aim of me and those of us that worked on the Slave Museum, that we would have our own front door, because at the moment you've got to go through the Maritime Museum. So it's a national museum, it's an international museum, doesn't have its own front door. So the project that's ongoing now, the big part of that is that it will have its own front door, and it will be connected to the current display galleries. So it's 3-4 times the size. So some really interesting discussions are ongoing now, real-time discussions. But be aware, I'm kind of sat at the side of that because I am on secondment, so I'm here carrying out research in other areas. So I'm still involved in that project, but until I go back in September, there is someone else who is leading it at the moment. So that's a brief history, Liz, that just to get us to this place.
I think that's just fascinating, and I'm interested to know, well, what are you doing at the moment then? And then we can maybe go back and questions about the Slavery Museum.
Of course. Well, no, I mean, thanks for asking, because people often still, understandably, still talk to me as if I am head of the Slavery Museum. Because I was the first head, for 15 years. It's a long time to be associated with somewhere. When I came away, for me, the International Slavery Museum, its name alone brought with it a lot of pressure. The International Slavery, which kind of says to people, you're telling an international story. But actually, the essence of ISM was which localities that it should be a very much a local museum. Now that's not easy, because even though there's not that many miles between the Royal Albert Dock and actually Liverpool Light, Michael's again probably got family there, and Garrick, it's what, several miles away. It's not too far away, but it's a world away, because the museum and the dock is in the city centre. It's the kind of, the beating heart of the city, all the tourists. And people sometimes feel very, disjointed from that, particularly those people from diverse communities in Liverpool. So even though you want to call yourself a local museum, you're actually based in a really difficult location. And that we always struggled with that. And I think you always will struggle with that. The thing about ISM is you are a real-time museum. You deal with narratives that are ongoing locally and nationally. And sometimes you make the right call, other times you make the wrong call. But on the resources and the team you've got, you try to do your best. You try to make people have a greater awareness of the subject of transatlantic slavery in all its kind of myriad of narratives and stories and all those things that we here know about. But you have to remember, the majority of people that go to ISM know little, very little, about the subject. It's not compulsory in schools, is it? It wasn't, and it isn't today. So you've got some schools that bring a group of young kids who might know quite a bit because the teacher is interested, but majority of schools that come know nothing. So the museum has to speak to multiple audiences, and that is not easy. That is not easy, and it's a tension that exists and will always exist about the different levels of knowledge that people have coming into it and what they should leave with. And even that's a debate. Should you leave with anything? You know, is it up to us to tell you something that you then take as being a definitive answer to a question and you take away? Or is that old hat now? And is it all about, you know, it's not about knowledge transfer, it's about knowledge exchange. You know, museums have always been about telling you something, haven't they? But that's, for me, is not how it should be. It should be, well, like us here today, and all the skills and experience you all bring. And you've got this kind of forum that you're able to openly share with. For me, that's what museums should do. And some of them do that. And I've always tried to do that. And there are kind of like networks of museums who think similar to that. But equally, we're a national museum. We're funded by DCMS. You know, we get the same money from the same pot as the British Museum and the National History Museum. So all those dynamics are involved as well. So when I came to the university, I needed to take a few years out to kind of develop threads and strands that I would then take back with me. So very briefly, one, there's always been a bit of a juxtaposition, sometimes an uneasy relationship, between a museum that its core is transatlantic slavery, because it's in Liverpool, so I don't need to tell you why the core and the focus is and always will be transatlantic slavery. But equally, as a museum that is funded and needs to get funding every year, you also have to look at other ways of engaging with audiences that may not just want to engage with the subject of transatlantic slavery. Again, that's difficult for some people who just think, well, why are you even bothered about those people? But when you're a national museum, you have a remit, and that is to engage with as many people as you can. So part of my original strategy and what I was given in 2007 was try to engage people with other areas of enslavement, okay? And again, put aside whether you agree with that, but that was part of the remit. And one of those areas that we started working in was in the field of what you can term contemporary forms of slavery. Nowhere does the museum ever say that is anything than its own thing. It's not anything, it's not a form of transatlantic slavery. We don't connect them through this historical timeline. We never do that. But equally, it's an uneasy juxtaposition sometimes. And I think we've got to a stage now, 15 years down the line, we've got some marvelous partnerships with NGOs, you know, organizations that work with trafficked women, organizations that work with men who are trafficked and have safe houses in Liverpool. We're probably the most trusted museum in the country when it comes to working with NGOs on this subject. So I'm very proud of that. Equally, I realise there's tensions with that as well. So when we're having this capital project development now, you know, next steps, do we continue doing that or do we cut back on doing that? These are up for discussion. So one of the things is I am part of a forum here at the university that has researchers literally in most areas, sadly, of contemporary forms of slavery you can imagine. There is some research going on up here. So I'm working with the academics here to see whether or not we go into new areas or we take a step back. So there'll be a very practical outcome of my time spent up here. And just very, very, very briefly, the other element of my research, as somebody who comes from a diverse background, I have always strongly believed that your own lived experiences as a museum professional. I mean, I'm an archaeologist by trade. So before I came into the museum world, that's what I studied. I was an archaeological theorist. I was interested in community engagement with diverse history. So actually, that's my background. And I was doing that at Liverpool University and in the States. So I've always been about community engagement. That is my actual background. But I kind of got into museums. And I've always thought that's really an important element of the work that certain museum professionals, myself included, do. But I don't always think that the institution we work in understands that. So one of the things I'm looking to develop further is the interactions between institutions like museums and art galleries and Black artists, and whether or not there is certain ways of working that are detrimental to working with artists, and there's other ways we can do things in the future. Maybe coming up with some kind of template that museums and galleries can kind of use and think about when they're engaging with people from diverse backgrounds. It's a lot more complicated than that, but at the end of the day, it's very much to do with lived experiences and how that affects your practice. So, and that includes all things like decolonization, you know, critical curatorial work, all the things you guys will probably talk about in many of your other sessions. That's all mixed into that. What is decolonisation, for instance? Or how do museums engage with Black Lives Matter? He's putting a sign up enough, and everyone put signs up when sadly George Floyd was murdered. Most museums in the country did. But what's happening now? But as someone from a diverse background, it's like with you all the time. So it's like, okay, well, we don't just switch on and off in our engagement with this. Garrick, you're doing work in the Windrush, for instance. You don't switch that on, do you? But museums have probably delved into it and dipped into it when it was really newsworthy, and then they've dipped back out again. And for me, that's detrimental. And I think there needs to be new ways of working with those kind of narratives. So I'll shut up there, Liz, on that.
I think you just say, just talk. I'd just like to say, though, that I've just seen on the screen that Jonathan Greenland's joined us. Jonathan, director of the Museum of Jamaica. Jonathan, are you there? Right, maybe switch the camera on. Maybe.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, Liz. Yeah, I'm here. Can
Jonathan,
you hear me?
how wonderful to hear you.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And you?
I'm good. Sorry, I think Mr. Crawford passed on my apologies. I had a different engagement earlier on, so I'm just getting out of it, and I'm here now. So I've missed most of what was going on. So
it's okay, no problem. We just introduced ourselves first of all, and then we asked Richard if he'd start to tell us about the work he's doing currently at the moment, and what his plans are for the future. We're going to hear about next. So, Jonathan, if you're able to stay with us, that would be great for you to. You you're welcome to comment. Welcome to comment on the questioning as well, questions and a proper discussion. So I'm really delighted that you've joined us. I have so much respect for you, Jonathan. Jonathan's Welsh by birth, living in Jamaica and doing a fantastic job, not only with the Museum of Jamaica. I hope I'm getting the terminology right here, as the director of the Museum of Jamaica, but also the, I can't remember what the art gallery is called, no, not the Institute, the art gallery as well.
Well, I'm not running the National Gallery at the moment.
Oh.
I'm running National Museum Jamaica. So it's
Good on that.
Yeah, I was doing both for a while, but it was, as Mr. Crawford could testify, it's a kind of an exhausting job doing both. But now I'm focusing more on National Museum.
Right. Well, we'll go back now to pick up with where we were with Richard. So, Garrick, do you want to come in at this moment?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I think for Richard, because we have an international audience, both from outside the UK and other places, it may be a good idea just to say a little bit about some of the activity of the museum. And just a couple of weeks ago, we were speaking on the death of, our good friend, the name had just gone up my head, Arabella Fonte. And his daughter, I was explaining to Liz, his daughter came to Liverpool, was invited, for the special memorial talk. So maybe you could say something about the 23rd of August, and also maybe some of the key international visitors we've had over the years.
Of course, Garrick, yeah. So the 23rd of August, which I'm sure many of you know, is a UNESCO event, a day on the remembrance of transatlantic. So it's the bicentenary of the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade. So UNESCO, it must have been in the 90s. Don't quote me on this, but it's a UNESCO kind of originally funded event. And since 1999, and again, Michael and Garrick, you may have actually attended, Liverpool and National Museums Liverpool, in partnership with Liverpool City Council, although it is National Museums Liverpool that do the majority of organising for it, has held a remembrance event on the Liverpool historic waterfront. I think it moved a few miles away a few years ago. It went to a place called Otter's Pool, which is a few miles it's a few miles out of the city centre. It's still on the waterfront, but at the end of the day, it's usually on the historic waterfront. And I think in the early days, if I'm right, it used to be right in front of what's called the Three Graces in Liverpool. So, you know, the Cunard building, the Port of Liverpool building, and the famous Liver building. So it was you know, very important where the libation took place. And some of the elders sadly have passed now who gave that libation. Other elders are still with us, Chief Angus Chukwemeka. So I always thought, even though it wasn't me that just organised it, it was a National Museum's Liverpool event, but from 2007, I always thought that the libation was the central element to this, actually, for me, and I think for many of us at the museum. But alongside that, one of the big events was an annual lecture, usually the night before, Garrick, wasn't it? Usually the night, the 22nd, was the talk. And as Garrick rightly said, what the whole point was inviting an internationally recognised speaker. I mean, they can be from, you know, the UK and locally as well, there have been. But the original speakers were, you know, people like Lonnie Bunch, who was the then director of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And he's now the secretary of the Smithsonian. And the Smithsonian Museum and the International Slave Museum has a memorandum of understanding that took place in 2007. So that's a big deal. And Jesse Jackson was one of the visitors that came to the museum in 2007. So a big part of it was getting speakers of that who have a profile, who would be able to engage with new audiences and would be of interest to local and national audiences as well. So yes, over the years, there's been some marvellous and diverse speakers. David Olusoga, who is a very well-known broadcaster now in the UK, has spoken. Gina Belafonte spoke several years ago. Contacted her recently, sadly, because her father passed away, who never actually, it's interesting, and you know, obviously Harry Belafonte never spoke as the speaker for the Slavery Remembrance Day, but he gave the keynote speech at the opening event of the International Slavery Museum at St George's Hall, which is this big old Georgian building in the centre of Liverpool, very famous. And that's where the opening event of the Slavery Museum, to great fanfare, took place. And I remember I had to say a few words. I was incredibly nervous because I'd never really spoken in front of that many people before. And I was on the same table as Dr. Molefi Asante, who was someone I was always very engaged in their research. It was a big deal for me. And then obviously you're speaking after Harry Belafonte, and I made some quip about the fact that my auntie really liked him, which I don't know how that went down. I think he laughed. But it was true. I didn't know what else to say. So yeah, Garrick's right. You know, that we've had some major speakers. It isn't actually, this is interesting, it isn't a national event. People think it is. It isn't. There's no support from government for this. You know, London, I think, now do host something at the Greenwich Maritime Museum. I know that because members of their team came up to see us to see how you would start that event. So at Liverpool, not me, people in Liverpool, members of the community, people like Garrick and Chief Angus and Dorothy Cuya, sadly, who's not with us anymore, and you know, Eric Lynch, who's sadly not with us. It was you that led on it, and that's why people like Bernie Grant came in 1999. The great Bernie Grant, who, as many of you know, was leading on the discussion around African reparations in the 90s in the UK, along with other people as well. Some of you probably on this call. So it's a really important event for Liverpool. So yes, that's the context. That's the context of it.
I'm just wondering now, Richard, if the audience may want to raise any question out of what you've actually told us about.
Jim, I think you want to ask something, and Jim's celebrating his 60th wedding anniversary on that International Day. So yes, amazing. Jim, would you like to come in?
Yes, I'd like to make a brief comment first. The woman I've married to for nearly 60 years is a white Londoner from Irish and Scottish background. She was born in North London. So that's an achievement in itself, in a mixed relationship, starting way back in 1962. And I've got interested in Black history. It was never taught at school. I hardly attended school in Guyana, where I was born anyway, and I came to London at age 17. but it's something I needed to know about my past, where I'm coming from. And I visited the museum in Liverpool with my wife, and she spent an entire career, nearly 40 years, in teaching. And her comment after visiting the museum to me was, Jim, I used to use this type of material when I started my career as a teacher. And it's focused very much on the 60s and 80s about Black people campaigning in white liberal institutions, pushing the concept that we are the same. The only thing that's different is our skin color, but our ambitions and lifestyle and much of it is the same. And clearly, it's difficult to explain slavery, colonialism, of 400 years in any single institution or using a single method. So whilst I believe the museum in Liverpool has done tremendous work, and I'm glad Richard has mentioned Dorothy Kuya, because I worked with her on the CRE, and she's a mixed race African woman who dressed in traditional gear, African gear, and she was seen as outrageous at that time, not only from people within Liverpool, but outside Liverpool. But she was a champion. And I'm sure that the community has been involved in this project in Liverpool, but I'm a little bit disappointed. But it was good to hear what Richard has said, that a lot of work needs to be done. We're learning all the time, and with the internet and new technology, that information could be developed faster, not only with the local community, because it's difficult to define a local community in the age of international communication, social media, and everything else, because the world is available to us as a community, and we not only learn from our local street and local town, but we're learning from the world, and we can import good practice all the time. So I believe that's an area that the museum need to look at. Not only focusing on an acceptance of Black people, and we are normal, and we can be part of society if we can overcome the institutional prejudices and so on. But, you know, we have a legacy of oppression and murder and killing and seizing our economy, raping our women, plundering our wealth, and much of that still goes on in a different form and in a less emotive way. And so the museum needs to pick up on some of that. The liberal attitude has changed since the 60s, but sadly, much work needs to be done, because you only need to say in Britain, you know, the Conservative government have been in power since 2010. An increasing number of Black and Asian African people in Britain are voting Tory. I think half the senior cabinet, or more than half, the Home Secretary, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, the Business Secretary, all Black and African and Asian people. And, you know, where is racism? Who's the source of it? Which institution? And where the power lies to change it? So it's not the horrible bosses, I was told. In my 60 years of active trade unionism, nationally and regionally, I've been told the horrible bosses is our enemy. But I think some of them are, but our enemy has been the people from a certain political class, regardless of their color, religion, race. And that is got to be incorporated in the slavery thing, because there were Black and Asian people who contributed and made money out of slavery, and they are now making money in neocolonism and post-slavery. This is the way society is organized. So the discussion's got to take a different form. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Jim, for that, if I may call you that. First of all, congratulations. I'm married to a white Irish lady as well, and I hope I get to 60. I hope I get to 60. I don't think she can put up with me for 60 years, to be quite honest with you. But you know, and your Guyanese as well. So it's lovely to hear that. You're absolutely right. And you know, some of the things you were saying about there are nuanced, and you know, they can be difficult subject matters. And I think it's interesting. So when I came there in 2007, and I don't believe in passing the buck. You know, I was head of the museum for 15 years, and it's what I was paid to do. But the reality is, the majority of what you see when you went in there with your good wife as well was put together by multiple curators and teams from multiple standpoints and areas of expertise. Maybe some people say that's how it should be done, but I inherited that, and I found a lot of it to be problematic even in 2007. And there are areas of the museum that I have always felt have needed to readdress issues in a much more open way. That said, the saving grace here is that I always knew that this capital project was on the horizon. It took longer than I thought, and that there would eventually be funding for us to kind of reassess like now and reevaluate. So it took longer than I thought. So everything you've just said about some of those difficult issues, you know, particularly what you've just said about the current members of the cabinet, you know, that's an uneasy relationship, isn't it? You know, those types of issues. It's not just simply an us and them kind of mentality. So I think the thinking of 2006, 2007 has changed. And I think the museum now would have to be a lot more dynamic in how it addressed, rightly so. I mean, I'm absolutely agreeing with what you said. The mechanisms for doing that, you said your wife was a teacher, you know, she's a lifelong educator. So that at the end of the day, a museum is supposed to tell stories to educate people. That's what I think a museum should do. So we can't really tell people like your good wife how to use the information we have, because I'm not an educator, you know, I'm an archaeologist, curator, and what have you. So working with young people and working with people who don't know anything about the subject, at the end of the day, that is key. You know, you have a high level of understanding, as everyone else does probably on this call, but the young people of today don't. So I think one of the things the museum needs to do, and I am pleased to say there are conversations going on absolutely right now about the development of a centre for teaching Black history as part of the new reassessed, revigorated International Slave Museum. That's being led by people in the Learning and Participation team, which is a team that exists in National Museums of Liverpool. But there are ongoing discussions and work happening today. And I will say to you and anyone here, if you would, after this, if you would like me to share anything in a bit more detail or put you in contact with anything or point you in the direction of literally any information that is being, I will happily do that so that you can see exactly where it is.
Thank you.
He makes some very valid points, and I totally agree with you.
Oops, we'd like to take you up on that offer as well. Sorry, I didn't realise I'd muted myself.
I think Vivian had his hand up a couple of times. It went down. Yes, it's up again.
Vivian?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair, acknowledging me. And I want to thank Dr. Benjamin for his presentation so far. He has evoked my curiosity because, you see, Doc, I am descendant, my ancestors came from Ghana, and I am descendant of Maroons with whom the British had to sign what is called a treaty. And in colonial education, enslavement was under the carpet. But what I recall is this triangle, the trade, Africa, the West, to England. And I remember Liverpool. I remember Liverpool as a child, remember Liverpool, and back to Africa. I wonder if you would go behind the veil, if it is possible, to tell us the role of Liverpool in all this. And also whether there is any link with any of the Western countries which now bear the stain of enslavement, because there are items on the agenda still outstanding. One is low self-esteem. And I'm not surprised that this crime and violence that we talk about is because sometimes we do not know who we are. And our own hero, Marcus Garvey, said that people without the knowledge of their heritage, their culture, is like a tree without roots. And so I just wonder if you could just go behind the veil to tell us what was happening in Liverpool.
Thank you, Vivian, for that question. So, I mean, I won't be able to go into it in great detail. This is it's a whole presentation in itself, and there are people who are a lot more knowledgeable about this than me. Liverpool was, the way I would describe it is, quite frankly, was from the mid 18th century until the abolition of the British slave trade, 1807, was the leading European slave trading port. To put it into some context, several thousand slaver ships left the docks in Liverpool. The docks that are literally located yards away from where the Maritime Museum and the International Slavery Museum are. So the museum is absolutely immersed and embedded in the physical environment. I mean, literally, it's, you know, you can see it, you can feel it, and you can hear it. So Liverpool today, if you were to take a walk through the streets, and again, you know, Garrick and Michael, they're people who've lived there all his life. Michael was born there. Many of the streets, scores and scores, are named after people who in some shape or form benefited from the enslavement of Africans. You can walk down the main street in the city of Liverpool, Lord Street, where all the major shops are, and if you take off, we call them snickets in Yorkshire, if you go down a little snickle way or a snicket here and there, you'll come across another street that's named after people like the Tarleton family and Bannister Tarleton, who was, you know, known as, it was a beast in the American War of Independence for the atrocities that he carried out. His family were a long line of people who traded in enslaved Africans. So, you know, the blood of enslaved Africans literally is something that seeps through much of the brickwork and built environment of the city, which, when you really think about it, is what makes it so very challenging for many people from the Black community to literally come into the centre of the city of Liverpool. I think unless you're from a family where that is in you, it's very hard to understand, isn't it? To walk by a street that's named after someone that may or may not have had some form of ownership of someone in your family. You know, Jim, you're Guyanese, so you know more than anyone here what it's like. And there are many people in Liverpool who own plantations, i.e. the Gladstone family, that are in, but then, you know, British Guyana, which is obviously now Guyana. So for anyone from a diverse background, when you're walking around the streets of Liverpool, you're literally, sadly, walking through the history of the transatlantic slave trade. That's how raw it is. Many members of many MPs were involved. Too many to mention. Bristol and London as well, Lancaster, they were involved, Glasgow, etc. But Liverpool took it to another level in that sense. And we live with the legacies of that in the city. So that's a very brief way of putting it there, Vivian.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. I just leaned over and got hold of my copy of this book, which it might be, I don't know whether, now that things are often online, this is by Anthony Tibbles. Can you see it?
Okay.
Book on
Because you see, what no one is really addressing, and this is my continuing regret, is this concept that the sociologists call acculturation, where the victor imposed their culture, their values on you. I take a simple thing like language. It's just recently that UNESCO declared that a child should be taught in the mother's language. Hitherto, with the Jamaican language, we were brutalized in school. We were punished for speaking our own language, the language we knew how to communicate. We were laughed at if we did not speak standard English. And so this whole thing of expressing yourself to be a person, that was under the carpet. So I'm saying this to say that language is one. I take clothing. You are in a tropical country, good God, temperature zooming, and you are in jacket, tie, and all that. Please, what's going on? And no one seems to be addressing these issues. they're all under the carpet, which came from the Midlands.
Oh, Vivian, that was just so true. And being a person who came from Kidderminster, the carpet factory, the carpet capital, yes. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. Now I know, Richard, that you need to get on your way very shortly, don't you?
I've got 5 minutes, Liz. Otherwise, my marriage will not get anywhere near the 60 years of Jim's. Let's put it that way. I have a domestic.
Yeah,
Well,
in the 5 minutes, Richard, before you depart, can you just tell us what are current features at the museum at the moment for the month of May and the next couple of months?
I mean, the big focus, Garrick, what we're in now, May, isn't it? I mean, they're already planning, for instance, for Slave Remembrance Day is where the majority of the team is working on at the moment. So you have your core programming, which is, you know, the education sessions, and you can find all that out on the International Slave Museum webpage. What's happening the next couple of weeks, I don't know specifically, because obviously I'm not down there at the moment. But I know that the two big things that the team are working on. One is Slave Remembrance Day. I don't think they've got a speaker lined up as yet, or I don't think anyone's quite confirmed yet. And the other element is working on the capital project with the architects. So the architects, one of the things I should have said for the major project is Ajay Associates. So David Ajay, you know, the very famous British Ghanaian architect, and his firm, and he's got a project going on in Barbados. He's worked in Harlem with the Studio Museum, and obviously the big one he did was the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC. Kind of goes around with Lonnie Bunch, who obviously is the secretary and was the inaugural director of that museum. So they're working on this project, and they're literally weekly, they're having sessions with the curators and many members of the community who are engaged with the project as well. So that's where the focus is at the moment.
Absolutely fantastic. Michael, if you come in next, thank you. And then it would be lovely for Jonathan Greenland just to introduce himself while you've still got a moment, Richard.
Yes.
Hi, nice to meet you, Richard. As Liz mentioned, I run National Museum Jamaica, which is like a string of community-based museums. But we also assist communities, people like the Maroons and Rastafari and various of these sort of special interest groups in Jamaica who want to have some kind of museum exhibition space. So we help in museum development, generally speaking. Currently, we're developing a major museum in Port Royal, which is, for those of you who don't know Jamaica at all, it's a very important town in terms of the evolution of Jamaica. And a critical aspect to it was the slave trade. It's really where it began in Jamaica. And from the 1670s on, it was a major industry which played a massive role in the development of Jamaica, but also in the development of the United Kingdom. So we're in a similar space to you in terms of, you're saying how when you walk down the street you're kind of surrounded by it. Obviously in Jamaica we're surrounded by it. It's not something which we've ever been able to kind of, I mean, maybe Mr. Crawford remembers the day when it was swept under the carpet, but for me, I've been here for 19 years and it's never been under the carpet. It's a kind of front and central issue. It's the most important issue in Jamaican history. And so it's not something we could possibly ignore. So virtually every single one of our exhibitions, whether it's a permanent exhibition or a temporary exhibition, has something to do with slavery, because obviously in Jamaica, when slavery was finally abolished in 1838, all the conditions surrounding it, I mean, slavery was abolished, but all the conditions around it continued unabated, pretty much, which led to the uprising in Morant Bay and you know, countless forms of resistance and ultimately independence. And so it's not something which we can leave out of any of our narratives. And so it's always there front and central for us. So we're in a similar kind of position, I imagine, to you. we've been very kind of interested over the past 3 years or so when we've been contacted by a lot of museums in America and a lot of museums in UK, particularly in Scotland, about how to deal with these kind of issues, how to decolonization and how to treat with artifacts that have a obvious relationship with the slave trade and sugar and all that. And so we've started a lot of interesting conversations with different museums around the space, but we haven't had a chance to speak with you. So in the future, I would love to, continue that conversation.
I think that would be incredible, Jonathan. And Richard's nodding. And Richard, what you were saying about while the building work's going on, that your exhibits are going to have to go on the road. I just wondered if they go overseas as well, because that would be a great way. Because I've been in some of Jonathan's museums. He's been kind enough to show me around. A fabulous, exciting, interesting, deep, great deal of depth in the exhibitions that they've got and the presentations of how to tell the story. So it struck me that with modern technologies, there must be good ways that we can share information or practically share things.
It's a good point. Well, just on that, just to finish. So again, those discussions are in place now about what happens, on the road, what have you. And I'm actually meeting the curatorial team on Monday. And what I will do at that, one, it'd be great, Jonathan, yes, to be able to continue the discussion. And I will ask them where they're up to with that, because if they're not thinking of that, whether or not, Liz, that's a possibility, then I think they should be. It might not happen, but you need to be having that discussion now to either rule it in or rule it out. And Jonathan will know this. You don't always do something that you're talking about. But I think that's a really interesting concept, actually, of what happens. The National, you might correct me here, but the National Portrait Gallery I think is reopening soon. It's been closed for a couple of years in London, maybe a year or so. But it reopens, I think, very, very soon. And they had contacted museums around the country to see whether they were interested in possibly taking some of their collections when they closed. So it could be an interesting discussion, Liz. Yeah.
Michael here. It actually opens. It opens in June. It opens in June. In June, yeah. And I was part of that, moving around the country when we went to Liverpool. Yeah. My exhibition went to Liverpool. So no, it's really positive. You go over to Jamaica or whatever, and when you close down, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Oh well, I'll catch up with you, Michael, about that.
If Jonathan's just finished, can I ask my question, Liz?
Yes, of course.
Jonathan, are you finished yet?
Oh yes, I finished. Yeah.
My question is one about this international slavery and modern day slavery. How do you plan to resolve the two in this new building?
Sorry, is that question for me?
It was to Richard.
Okay.
So Richard.
Is he gone?
Very quickly, Richard, then. Richard, I can't hear.
Yeah, I've got to leave in about a minute, I'm afraid. But yeah, Michael, so it's a good point. I think it could go one of two ways. I think there could be a reassessment of whether or not there will be physical space that you would actually have as this is a gallery or this is a temporary display area that focuses on this, that, or the other to do with contemporary slavery. I think it could go that way. There is a curator who's curator of contemporary histories, and that's a new role. And it is part of their remit to ask those kind of questions. I met them only a few weeks ago, and they were asking for some of my kind of advice and background about how the museum got to where it was. As I said to you guys at the beginning, that was part of the long-term strategy at the time, but these things change. So I said that to them. You're there now. You need to maybe make that decision with the current curatorial team. Is there a physical space that is, okay. Or do you move away from that? And do you focus on themes and threads through narratives, so forms of enslavement and how that affects young people or women or men? There's different ways of looking at it. So whether it be an actual overt physical area is one thing. If it is something that is embedded in the narratives across other galleries, that's another thing. My strong advice, which depending on which way the curatorial team think it should go, is it's taken a lot of years to build a lot of trust with a lot of organisations. I'm a bit old-fashioned in some respects, because I do actually believe trust means something. I think you have to earn it. And we earned it. We put a lot of time and effort into listening to people, and I think we have made a difference to some people's lives. And for me, as a museum, whether you're focusing on transatlantic slavery or contemporary slavery, if people trust you and they think you're really trying to do your best, I wouldn't want the museum to turn its back on a lot of the organisations in that field who we have worked with for over a decade. But it isn't just about my voice and my decision. It is where the curatorial team and the members of the community that they're speaking to now feel as if it should go. But that's my strong suggestion. Don't maybe move too quickly away from partnerships that have taken so long to develop. So watch this space, Michael.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Richard. And I'm sorry that you're not able to stay, but we're going to hopefully have another opportunity to talk with Jonathan. So thank you very much indeed, Richard. You can listen to the recording of this. It's been really fascinating. And I look forward to meeting you because that would be really special for me.
Likewise. It's been lovely to meet, and thank you everyone for your time. I really appreciate it, and I hope to speak to you all again, and some of you outside of here in other conversations. It'd be a pleasure to do that.
And we have a wonderful team here. Marika Sherwood's joined us. That's just marvellous. Oh. Lovely to have you with us. We've also got Audrey Juji and Sylvia Collicott, who are also Joan Grant, researched such a lot in the UK in your different fields. We've also got Walter Lavelle, Dr. Walter Lavelle from Maypen Rotary, who's a part of the Penance project that we're working on to improve the Penance community in Clarendon. Ivor Johnson is himself from Penance, and Ivor's one of the folks that meet up every week while we discuss with the Douglas Pennant Family Foundation how the reparation's going to go. And I think we'll probably end up with an infant department being built there as one thing, but who knows, there's lots of other things. But so thank you very much indeed, Richard. Thanks a lot then. And Michael, thank you for your comments there. Jonathan, can I pass over to you now then for a moment to tell us about what some of your exhibitions are at the moment, some of the activities that you're doing in Jamaica?
Sure. As you may know, Jamaica is not really a great museum visiting audience. So a lot of what we do is going out to schools. Obviously, we're trying to attract people to our exhibitions all the time, and but we do often go out to, so a lot of our staff are involved with outreach programs to schools, communities, events, things like that, and they take the collections on the road, basically. This morning I was involved in a touch tour program, which involves members of the sight impaired community actually engaging with our collections through touch. And so we have a number of artifacts in all our locations. We have, a museum in Spanish Town, a museum in Montego Bay, museum in Kingston, but also and the one in Port Royal. And so persons who are visually impaired can come and visit and have an experience with the artifacts. Clearly using artifacts which are often replicated within our collection. We have a large collection of over 20,000 historical artifacts, which are sort of on a rotational basis exhibited in our various spaces. But the East Street is really our headquarters, where we have our conservation lab and our storage facilities and a lot of the curators and researchers. Spanish Town is really dedicated to the lives of the persons after emancipation in 1838. So what were their lives like, and how did they fashion their lives in this new kind of world? And so that's a kind of, and it also looks at how the city was built, who built it, all the different trades and skills, that museum is located in a very underserved community. It's literally on Emancipation Square, but the area around it is got very high levels of illiteracy, very high levels of unemployment, very high levels of youth pregnancy. And so that museum is kind of, often we do sort of youth empowerment programs and things like that. People learn skills and trades and through a historical medium, so they understand how the city was run in the old days, as a way of comparing it with the way in which the city is run today, and how it's built today. Our museum in Montego Bay is right on Sam Sharp Square, so another very important site of memory. Sam Sharp is one of the national heroes of Jamaica. He was a resistance fighter and led a famous uprising in about 1831 at Christmas time, which had a massive impact on Jamaican history and sort of like really tipped the balance in terms of slavery. Before that, it had been, the trade was abolished in 1807, but it hadn't been, the slavery itself hadn't been abolished in Jamaica. So it wasn't long after that it finally came to an end. And he was caught and executed on that square as well. So, and tried within the building where the museum is. So another site of memory. And that really focuses on the history of the West in Jamaica. So the whole development of the West, the sugar industry, the tourism, and all these aspects. And the future Port Royal Museum is going to be our first purpose-built museum, which is a joy, because in the past we've always, somebody has an old building they don't know what to do with, and so they say, oh, we need to have a museum then. So these buildings are often not very well suited to museum. The access is poor. It's difficult for people with mobility issues. The bathrooms aren't adequate for visitors. These kind of things are the constant issues for us. So Port Royal is the first purpose-built one. It will have full access, so anybody will be able to visit it, which is fantastic. There's adequate parking, there's elevators, there's or lifts, there's proper bathrooms. It's all, there'll be restaurant facilities and cafe and a big shop and things like that. So it's kind of quite an exciting project. So we have a very, as you know, Liz, we have a very small staff, very small, 34 people in total for all these museums. And so it's a lot of work. That's really our front and central agenda item at the moment. But we're also in dialogue with the Railway Corporation about developing a railway museum in the old Kingston Central train station, which is almost a sort of museum already. Really what happened is when the railway kind of like ceased most of its operations, there is a railway in Jamaica, but it's mainly for bauxite. Basically it's almost as if they kind of locked the door and walked away. So when you go in there, it's really a sort of almost like a relic of a 1960s or something. And there's a steam engine there. There's loads of rolling stock and carriages, the waiting rooms, the ticket office, the cafe. It's all still there under a layer of about an inch layer of dust. So it would be a very easy kind of fix. So we've been in dialogue with them and with a group of people, a lot of whom are British, who have an interest in railways. Also the Friends of the Georgian Society of Jamaica, which is a great organization based in the UK. And they have we have a Georgian society here in Jamaica. They're a group of interested individuals who sort of like support heritage projects, in particular Georgian history, but all history basically. And then there's the Friends of the Georgian Society of Jamaica, which is based in the UK, which usually raises funds to support conservation projects. So they're also involved. So that's another kind of interesting collaboration. Plus people up in America as well, who have quite a lot. Virginia seems to have an interest in Jamaica and colonial history here. So that's been another form of collaboration. So I think that's kind of like an overview of where we are at the moment.
Well, that's fantastic, and it's so interesting to hear about all of this. And the Railway Museum, that was interesting to comment. Have you got anything, are you doing any displays to do with Windrush with the 75th anniversary?
We had a big exhibition on the sort of Windrush generation a few years back, which was called Lest We Forget, and it was a sort of an exhibition about Jamaica's role in the First and Second World Wars, and
Yes.
it involved the sort of Windrush discussion. We haven't done anything recently, but it's a good idea for us to focus on it somewhat. I mean, in Port Royal, we also look at, you know, a lot of the persons who in Port Royal, a lot of people were served in the merchant navy during the Second World War. And so there's an important sort of community project we're doing out there. And some of those persons ended up migrating afterwards. As you know, a lot of the Windrush generation were persons who'd actually been in the armed services of RAF and the Navy mostly. And they ended up migrating after the Second World War, helping to rebuild Britain. So yeah, we will have elements of it. We haven't done a specific Windrush exhibition though.
Right, okay. Well, we're going to move on next week. I'll just share the screen with our somewhat scruffy looking website, because next week we've got Melissa Williams coming to join us. Garrick's invited her. And then we're looking at the plans for recognition in the Caribbean. So I've been talking to Rudy Page and Vivian Crawford, obviously, about what's going to be happening. So that'll be quite an interesting session. And then we just take the next few, you can see this is a working document. We take the next few sessions going through as we explore the stories as we take the time until the Windrush arrives for the official celebrations in the UK. So we did this last year. We travelled as the ship travelled from May the 24th through to June the 22nd, because it is a really, really important story. Okay, so thank you very much indeed for that. Okay, I don't know if anybody else has got any other questions that you want to ask. It would be really interesting, maybe Ivor, I don't know if you've got anything that you want to comment on, because we ran this fantastic event 2 sessions ago looking at the history of Robert Rumble, and we now are going to apply to the Pennant family for some funding. Would you like to say anything, Ivor?
Not presently. We are really hoping that these review goes through, you know, the
Yes.
awarding of the funding goes through, hopefully. Looking forward to that. And so far, I've been learning a lot of the historical background here, learning so much, and we're looking forward to our own Robert Rumble presentation soon.
Ivor, if I just share the PowerPoint, you'll see here that this is the group that meets every week. It's the Jamaica Wales Alliance Advisory Group, and we're with the Pennants Community Development Committee. So it's a North Wales Jamaica Society, and colleagues in Jamaica, including Vivian Crawford. We're very grateful, Vivian, that you join us. And this was the event that we did to recognise the 85th anniversary of the presentation of the petition from the campaigning Pennants community to the Jamaican governor. We, because we're community researchers, Jonathan, you'll laugh at this one. The reason we knew about this anniversary and worked out the maths behind it is that on Pinterest, of all places, on Pinterest, there was a little item saying that it was the 23rd of April, 1938 in Jamaica, when Robert Rumble's Poor Man's Improvement and Land Settlement Association sent a petition to the governor demanding a minimum wage for the agricultural workers and penants, and to bring to an end the exploitation by the landowner, Lord Penrhyn, whose castle we know is in Wales, who managed his property through agents in Jamaica from his home at Penrhyn Castle. So that was a Penance local history project, but it was supported by the Society for the Study of Labour History, and also the George Henry Foundation, who actually supported the tenants in Penance when they went on strike. So what we would really love, Jonathan, is some help to be able to cope better with this this research. We want to have some recognition. So this was a Society for the Study of Labour History, and so they we didn't even manage to get a copy of the petition, but we know we're in contact with Professor Anthony Bogues from Brown University, and he actually knew Robert Rumble, and as a young man he interviewed him. So there's great potential there, and there's a number of people in Penance who knew Robert Rumble and remember the story. So it's been really interesting following that one through. So perhaps we can link up again on that, Jonathan.
Absolutely, Liz. Yeah, and as you know, I've been very busy over the past couple of years, so I've been a little bit out of the loop, but I'm in the loop now.
Oh, excellent! That's really so good. And the guy who's National Trust, head of the National Trust in North Wales, he's joined us a couple of times on different sessions, and he's really interested in telling this other story, the story of Jamaica, and the plantations that the Pennant family had. So in terms of a reparation project, this is also enormously important, because it's got such potential, because the Pennant family had their plantations from soon after 1655, when Gifford Pennant came over with the invasion fleet, right through to 1940, and all their records are kept in Bangor University archives, and they've now made it possible, Jonathan, that they've had a new projector fitted to the ceiling, so the projector can look down on the maps, and so we can see the maps and see them on Zoom, which is just incredible. Unfortunately, they've got to have some work done in the building, but I think there will be some access while I'm over there, because we need to find out which information. So Ivor's been very, very helpful with this, and he's had a couple of sessions when Bangor University shared that. So it's about thinking about how to do that. And there's potential for a student from Jamaica and a student from Wales to exchange next year through a project called TITHE, Welsh Government project called TITHE. So if we could identify people to take part in that higher education exchange, there could be a really, really strong project there. And then we've got Denbigh as well as in North Wales with the Denbigh Showground and all those links. So a lot there. Okay, so Jonathan,
Liz, just a question. When you say the exchange, you mean the tertiary level or postgraduate or high school or what?
Any level. It's a very, very open field. We tried first of all to do a teacher exchange, but we did want to do it between Gwynedd and Clarendon. But for whatever reasons, although we were speaking to the two directors of education, they didn't get the application in for this year. But it's any level of education, tertiary, vocational, anything. So we're thinking of maybe getting some young farmers to link with the people at Denbigh, and there is money for exchange and research. Garrick, thank you for joining us, and thank you for your support today. Thank you. I know you need to go. So that would be really brilliant, Jonathan, if we could find somebody, to lead that.
Yeah, I mean, I have a strong connection with UE history department. If that's what you're thinking of, history, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'll start asking and seeing if there are any likely candidates.
Could you look it up? It's Taith. Taith. I can't remember what it means in Welsh. This is a very clear website, and it explains the full range. Wales is really, really stretching out to the world, and as a Welsh person myself, and you're Welsh, we want to take advantage of this. I'm sure it would be really, really good. Don't know if we've got any other Welsh people here. And Walter's very, very keen on educational links. So Walter Lavelle, we'll make sure that we get something through for next year. It'll just make it easier with me going back to the UK, and I can lobby a bit.
Yeah,
more.
I think it sounds interesting. I mean, Taith it usually means something like a journey, right? But
yes, that's what it means. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it'd be an interesting experience. Yeah.
It'd be absolutely fascinating.
Especially for farming. Well, the farming thing would be very interesting because the similarities and differences are going to be so extraordinary to explore them. Well,
you know the Denby Agricultural Showground.
Yes, I do. Yeah. Which one? There's one in Wales as well. Right?
Yes. Well, there isn't a showground in Wales. They just do a show and they do it in the field. But in Jamaica, the Jamaica Agricultural Society have got the showground, and it's exactly on the Denby plantation of the Pennant family.
Ooh.
And so the plantation, and in Penrhyn Castle, there is a painting of the Denby plantation, one of those done in the sort of early 1800s probably, and it's definitely, we had a researcher with us, and she had the modern Google map of the Denby Agricultural Show, and it fits right on top of the plantation map. So that's a very interesting thing. This Taith, apply for funding for your sector, and it's every type of education setting: schools, further education, vocational education, training, youth work, adult education, higher education. And there's a lot of money in it, Jonathan. It's about 5 million, I think. It's a really serious.
Well, thank you for that.
Bit of funding, and it would be brilliant if we could get something going with that. So thanks, folks, for letting me share that. It's just Taith, TAITH.Wales. www.
Yeah, well, one thing that Clarendon's famous for is sisal, which is what they used to make ropos of here. And they used to be large, plantations of sisal growing here, and because it likes hot, dry environments. But Mr. Crawford could probably enlarge.
Yeah, that's the southern part of Clarendon, near there.
Yeah.
Right.
Below Maypen here, below Maypen.
Right, that would be interesting.
They still exist.
I've never seen reference in the Pennant papers to sisal. They were growing other things other than that.
Oh, well, the priority, that would not be a priority. The priority would be cane.
Yeah, because in northern Clarendon, that would have grown better.
And the demand for sugar in Europe would be more than sisal.
Yes, it probably was. Yeah. One of the other projects that we've been involved in has been to do, I was just looking to see what else I'd got here in the, yeah, this is another thing I could share. Oh, sorry, it's getting a bit late here. Right, there's this new organisation called the Heirs of Slavery, and they are people like Laura Trevelyan and oops, today's, let me just make it bigger. Laura Trevelyan and the gentleman who wrote the book that you have, Vivian, I can't remember what his name is off the top of my head, Alex Renton. And Alex
Oh,
Renton
yes, Alex Renton.
wrote about his relatives, forefathers' plantations towards
Roselle St. Thomas.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Laura Trevelyan, this was on Australian radio, so it's really interesting that it was. And if you Google, presumably you can Google it and see it there, it's on RN, Radio National. But that was a really interesting presentation. And she's actually been in touch with me, which is nice. So, yeah. I think I've covered most of the things that I've got here, which are other bits and pieces. But just to let you know about this one as well, Jonathan, we did this work on Welsh Plains, the cloth, and I'm really interested in how the cloth was used on the plantations. It might not, there was lots of different cloth was shipped over to the Caribbean and North and South America, but this lady, Viv Collis, has had been to Dolgellau, and she's met up with Mervyn there, and she's had a really, really good visit, and she's exhibiting this. So from our project where we raised awareness about the fact that this cloth had been used so much in the was demanded, there was such a demand from Liverpool to include this cloth in the shipments. Several different projects have spun off from that with creative artists and actually recreating the cloth. So that's been a really interesting one as well. So, okay, well, Jonathan, it's just brilliant that you were able to be here with us. I'm just going to let other folks introduce themselves if they joined a little later. We've got Michael Ojura. Michael has done some wonderful work on the story of, I keep forgetting every time, Michael. John Blank, the trumpeter, the royal trumpeter, who's recorded in pictures. Have I got it right this time, Michael? I can't hear you.
Clicking the wrong button. I'm clicking the wrong button. Liz, I thought it was just me whose memory lapsed at the most critical moments. It's all gone. It's all gone. There you go. Then sometimes it just comes back. It comes back. No, John Blank. That's my man. That's my man. In fact, I just got news today. I was in the Met in New York. Well, I'm going to be in San Francisco.
Oh,
well, hang on, let me put it in perspective. They're not flying me out, sadly, but they're going to have a John Blank as part of because the exhibition moved from New York to San Francisco, so we're going to be there's going to be a John Blank presentation there. So that's very exciting, very exciting indeed. San Francisco.
Wonderful. And I think the links with royalty are really kind of special, and like everybody else, I think, or many other people, I'm sure, were watching the coronation, and it really made me think as the trumpeters were there, and I thought, oh gosh, it could have been.
And what's beautiful about that, and I bore my friends to death on this. That was real history there, in the sense that John Blank was a trumpeter to 1511 to Henry VII, Henry VIII. He would recognize that ceremony today. And you had the Pursuvians from the College of Arms who John Blank would have paraded with. They were there over half a millennium ago. And you could say a lot of things about the royal family in Britain, but that sense of tradition, that constancy, there's something special about it. You may love it or hate it, but there's something. You got 500 years plus, and it's there and it's meaningful.
It was fascinating.
Let me go a little bit further. I just one last point. The heralds are there to declare the heritage of the king. They can give his lineage going back to whenever. You've got similar functions when you go to visit kings, the Oba in Benin. he's got his herald. They're not called herald, but he's got his man who sits there and he speaks the heritage. And it can be quite boring, but these guys go way back because it declares the relevance, the validity of the man in front of you or the woman in front of you. This is their heritage. So that's part of a kingly, courtly tradition here in Britain and around wherever they have kings. I think it's all part of that pageantry. I think it's fantastic. I'll stop there.
Fabulous, isn't it? So that's Benin in Nigeria, right? Fantastic. I was going to say this is a bit wicked now, but that's okay. I don't know if any of you have watched Bridgerton. It's on Netflix. And there's a new Bridgerton. Is it Bridgerton? Am I getting my words right? I think I'm getting the wrong series. There's a new one on Queen Charlotte. Has anybody else seen it? Very interesting.
Yes,
Spicy.
I have, Lewis.
Yes, have you?
Yes, I have.
Right. So it was interesting to see the idea of a mixed court. It was, and the coronation in that, I thought it was reminiscent of Queen Camilla being crowned. Anyway, we won't go back into that. That was last week's conversation.
Yeah, she's a woman. She's a woman of color.
Yes, Queen Charlotte.
Right.
Yeah.
The Moors and the Portugal ancestry.
So it's very interesting that this fictionalized series is really bringing awareness of the fact that there were Black people in courts, not to the extent that they indicate in there. Right, so Simon's back again. So lovely. Just dropping in, but briefly, Michael. He says that in Senegal, people sometimes give their ancestry when they meet, looking for a common ancestor. They do that in Jamaica, I tell you.
I'll just come back to Stuart Hall. Stuart Hall talks about when you meet people and you ask where they come from, you get an essay, in the sense of my mum came from Huddersfield and her parents came from Scotland. They came down because they lost the land. My father, and so on and so on. That sense of heritage, and I guess we kind of lost that in terms of you just who you are. You are you, rather than all that hinterland that our parents and their parents had. No,
in Jamaica, we use the parishes.
Use the parish.
We use the parish.
The parish.
And you're highly favored if you're from Portland. Oops.
Yeah, but I'm going to say if in England, it would be Liverpool. You're highly favored.
Dr. Greenland knows that.
Well, I started off at the beginning.
I certainly do. I'm from St. Elizabeth, obviously.
Sorry, Jonathan, you say.
Dr. Greenland is from St. Elizabeth. He can be easily identified. He's at home there.
Well, it's good for you, Jonathan, to be meeting up with Vivian again. Vivian's been very good at supporting us with the Penance Project. Thank you so much, Vivian, for being with us today. Jean-Samuel Michela, thank you so much. And we had a little bit of a snapshot of some of your pictures, but we're going to have some more on another occasion, I'm sure. And when I get back to the UK, I've got a certificate for Jean-Samuel Michela because he's done such made a really significant contribution, particularly early in the days of Black History Conversations, which would be really nice to meet up with him again. So just saying thanks so much then, Vivian. Thanks so much, Jean-Samuel. Sylvia, it's always a delight to have you join us. Simon, I'm really pleased that you're back with us again for a few minutes. I know you had to nip out, but it's been a brilliant session again. Thank you so much for all that you do. Walter, brilliant talking to you again. And Walter, we had a really good meeting yesterday with the Penance group, so we can catch you up on that at some stage. Ivor, thank you ever so much for joining us. That was marvellous. And Jonathan, what we'd really like to do is have a little heritage centre in Penance and make a real bit of a story about the history there, both of the Robert Rumble's story, but the longer history there. So that will be really good. Jonathan, is there anything else you want to add?
No, I mean, we can help with, we could definitely help with the Heritage Centre. We couldn't run it, but we can certainly help if they want some advice and, you know, on tips on how to do it, we can help, yeah.
That would be wonderful, because we're asking the Douglas Pennant Family Foundation to fund it. So
Okay.
that would be really helpful. And I think funding heritage projects is a really good way of reparation. Smashing. Okay, well, thank you, Jonathan, then. So, Vivian, do you want to say anything to wrap up the session today?
You were going a little, I wasn't quite sure what next week's presentation will be about.
Oh, it's going to be, sorry, I'll just have to look it up again now. It's a lady called Melissa Williams. Melissa Williams, she's going to continue a conversation that she started with us a few weeks ago. And it'll be really interesting, because she's one of the people who's campaigning for the recognition of the Windrush generation and the compensation. So that's that one. And then the following week we've got Velma McClymont, from the author of Little River, and Rudy Page is going to talk about what's happening. But what we could really do with next week, Vivian, is for somebody to tell us what's going to happen with the National Windrush Committee event at the church. If somebody,
I'm supposed to be there. Yes,
Yeah,
another thing you should know, the meeting should know, that in Jamaica, I saw the Sunday Gleaner where Professor Vereen Shepherd wrote an article that the reparation should also include the Indians. They came when 1843, yeah. They should include the Indians because something went wrong with regard to the arrangement. So that is on the agenda of the Reparations Committee doing research at the University of the West Indies, led by Professor Vereen Shepherd. That has not yet been brought to the attention of the National Council, government's National Council on Reparation, and therefore might go to CARICOM, because our presenter, Dr. Benjamin, is from, ancestors came from Demerara and so on. So that should be very interesting.
That's true. That's very true. And it would be really good to follow that up. You just mentioned Professor Vereen Shepherd. She has offered to, Ivor, this is especially for you. She's offered to get the cemetery cleared again. When the BBC filmed in Pennants in 2007, they cleared the cemetery so that they could find the gravestones and tombs of the Pennant family, the early Pennant family. Be really good to remember that, and then with Jonathan and get some proper advice on how we do this, you know, the signage and everything else.
Right. That would be very good.
That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay,
And I also have some relics of the past, you know, that could be used I have some relics of the past with me, but can be used in building our heritage thing. Yeah.
Well, there's certainly going to be more
help.
relics and information, and really we need to do some archaeology on the Great House, because now we've got an idea off the maps that we're able to see that, you know, where the Great House was.
Right.
Is no longer. Thank you ever so much, everybody. We better wrap up now. And when you see me next time, I won't be sitting here in my furry evening jacket to keep warm, because I'll be in the UK, where I understand it's really warm.
Yeah, but at least you would allow me to just to say thank you on behalf of the group for your tireless energy we want to thank you most sincerely. It's a task you're doing which we can't take for granted because it's not easy.
That's
So
right.
thank you very, very much.
Okay, well, thank you all very much indeed, and thanks especially to Jonathan, to Vivian, to Walter, to Ivor who've joined us today from Jamaica. That's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome. You're welcome, Liz.